I'm going to share two things with you before we go into the first session of the day, which is the marketing through the crisis. And the first of the two things I'd like to share with you is a little bit of a mindset reminder. Some of you will be very familiar with this. For some of you, this may be your first time. Regardless, I truly believe this is one of the most powerful mindsets you could maintain, particularly when things are going bad. When things are going great, nobody realizes the mistakes that are happening. There's this concept that we talk about, the line of choice, and there's the question, where do you play? You could be playing above the line or you could be playing below the line. And each of these have their characteristic behaviors. So below the line behaviors, and there's three of them, are made up of blame, excuses, and denial. So blame is shifting the onus, or shifting that kind of responsibility onto somebody else, and kind of pointing and saying, well, it's their fault that this didn't work out. It's the customer's fault, it's the supplier's fault, it's the government's fault, it's Corona's fault, it's whatever else. The second is excuses. Excuses is also known by its fancier term, which is reasons. And the sentence would usually go along the lines of yes, but. And typically anything that comes after but would be a reason. But English is a language that does have some limitations, so that's not always the case. Keeping this in mind, one of the best things about this current pandemic is that it has equaled the playing field very, very significantly. And in fact, James has a visual around that. Once you see that visual on how the playing field's been leveled, I'm sure you'll never forget it again. But whatever your challenges are, everybody has those challenges. And somebody's going to win. I believe it was the CEO of the Shell Corporation who said that the only competitive advantage that businesses have is their speed of adaptability. So it's how quickly you can get back up on your feet and continue running while everybody else is still struggling to stand. That will determine how far along you go. If you want to lie down and or if you accept your team lying down and saying, oh, but we couldn't do anything, that's fine too. But that's your call. And the third and the worst is being in denial. And we can see what is happening with not just companies, but even with countries around the world who are suffering from this cancer of being in denial about the problems that do exist. Because if you bury your head into the sand and just refuse to admit that there's a problem, there is no fixing it. And these three are characteristic of what we call a victim mindset. Contrast that to playing above the line, and the three behaviors that go into that. The first one is taking ownership. Taking ownership is basically saying, well, this is my scope, this is my plate, this is my department, this is my business, regardless of what mine is, this is mine. And I will take everything that comes with this, whether it's good or it's bad. If there's fun stuff to do, I'm happy to take it. But when the problems come up, those problems are mine too. There is no passing the buck. So that's what taking ownership means. That if the problem comes, I will take it. Accountability is having decided what you're going to do about that problem, actually doing it. It's very easy to make resolutions and to make commitments. And I'm sure I'm not the only person on this list, but I was one of those people who, when this lockdown started, I said, you know what, I'm going to make sure I work out every day. I'm going to keep up with my daily exercise. I don't want to, become too complacent. And I am noticing a significant softening of my muscle. I am definitely losing muscle mass. And others said, I'm going to be diligent about this, and they are. Ben, and I can tell you this. I don't know how many of you know Ben Watts over here, but he's been working out not only every day, but on certain days he works out twice a day, and he's noticeably getting fitter over this time. So it's easy to say I am going to do something, but it's the actually doing it that sets the best winners and the best achievers apart from everybody else. In a business sense, of course, there would be different examples. The third is responsibility. This crisis hit. I said, you know what, I am going to execute ABC to get my business back on track. And I did execute ABC. And I did everything I said I would do, but it didn't work. Responsibility is putting your hand up and saying, you know what, I gave that one my best shot. It didn't work out the way I thought it would. I'm not making any excuses, but I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna try harder. I'm gonna try different. I'm gonna try partnering. I'm gonna try learning more. I'm going to do whatever it takes, because this failure is not what I'm happy with. I'm going to keep this responsibility. I'm going to continue working on it. These terms are are thrown around very casually. And I'm sure over these last few weeks, you must have had at least one, if not many of these terms used in your conversations or your thought processes about your teams. Like, is this person taking enough ownership? Is that person making excuses about how much they're working? I'm sure you've had all these thoughts go around. The way that I've structured these 6 behaviors is one perspective to look at. So the 3 that go above the line form what we call a victor mindset, somebody who's in it to win. And the 3 below the line form the victim mindset, which is, the one putting his hands up and saying, well, I couldn't do any better. This is kind of what I'm stuck with. You decide where you want to play. If you're playing above the line, it is going to take a lot, but the results are well worth it. And if anybody chooses to play below the line, I don't think you'd even be here on this call if you did. But if anybody chooses to play below the line, that's the loss that they're risking. The second thing I'd like to share with you is the basis of what we're going to be doing the planning on towards the second half of this session this morning. And I'd like to begin by a very quick exercise. So could you open up the chat box on your Zoom window and just pop down some answers that come to your mind to the questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first question is this: what goes into running a business? What are some of the principles required for a business to survive? Just survive. Hint, there are 3 principles I'm going to be looking for. So get into the chat box, either send it to me personally or put it on the group, however you like. What are some of the core principles for a business to be able to survive? I'm going to read out some of the answers. I know everybody can see them, but just in case anybody's personal message comes in, we got grit, we got cash flow, we got sale, we got team efforts, teamwork, leadership, state, strong customer base. These are lovely. Keep them coming. But I can tell you that most of you have only tapped on one of the 3 so far. Farsightedness, that's a very interesting one. Motivated leaders. Yep. Sometimes it's hard to keep up your own motivation. When you have to keep the rest of the team going, it can take its toll. Adaptability, empowerment, ability to change, flexibility, innovation, growth strategy, all came one after the other. Excellent. All of these are really, really good. You've probably touched on, so there was a bit of a trick in that question. I don't know if you picked that up. I said there's going to be 2 questions, and I said the first question is, what is required for a business to survive? I don't know if that gave you a hint about what the next question is going to be. And some of these answers, while they are brilliant, aren't only for survival. They might be for level 2, which is thriving. And I'm going to explain why that's so important to understand the difference between liquidity, plan for the future, agility, sustainable competitive advantage. Perhaps the only one is adaptability and speed of change. Minimizing overheads, yep, particularly in this time, running lean. Let me share with you some thoughts. Again, and this is a personal principle, right? Everything that I share with you has come out from the work that we've done with hundreds of clients over the years, has come out from the podcasts and the books and the various resources that have gone into formulating these strategies and ideas. But that doesn't mean they're absolutely right. And that definitely doesn't mean they are law or gospel or have to be applied in your business. So if there's anything that I say here which you don't think applies in your business, that's fine. This is not something that you either with us or against us. It's entirely possible that your business is unique. What I would like to share with you, and the slide that I'm about to demonstrate is going to be a good example of that. What I'm sharing with you are my understandings of the principles of successful business. And I believe if these are implemented in a business, the business will survive and thrive. And if any of these are missing in a business, then the business will not reach its full potential. Again, this is not gospel. So if you don't agree with it, that's absolutely okay, as long as you know what it is you're thinking about. I'd start off with these as the 3 fundamental pillars. If a business is to survive, these 3 have to be in place. And each of these has a very specific element of the business that it tackles. Now, imagine a three-legged stool. If you have a three-legged stool and one of the legs is weak or is short or is wobbly, the stool will not be stable. You would be hesitant to keep something fragile on that stool because it may fall and break. You will be very, very hesitant. You would actually refuse to, for example, allow your children to sit on that chair. You would not stand on that chair or that stool if you wanted to reach something on a high shelf, because the risk of damage caused by collapse is too high. In a business, these three legs are the pillars that carry everything that the business is about to do. So it's not just something fragile or risking a twisted ankle or a broken elbow. It is literally your livelihood, the future of your family, the security, safety, future, livelihood of every single person who works with you, the relationships with your customers and your suppliers, the brand that you've been building over decades in some cases. All of that rests on these three pillars. And if these three are not strong, the risk that you're running is extremely high. In good times, it's easy to just keep going because we don't realize the importance of these pillars. In times like this, the weight on all of these become very, very apparent. So on the top left corner, you see finance and growth. Finance and growth is everything to do with financials, with money, whether it's to do with the generation of, which is marketing, if it's to do with the collection of, which is sales. And sales and marketing are two different things. They're not the same. You know, I know a lot of businesses have sales and marketing, but those are two very unique streams that businesses need to be considering. So whether it's the initial generation of, which is marketing, if it's the collection of by selling something, by closing a contract, that is sales. If it's the management of the money that exists within the organization, that's accounts and the auditing. All of that comes under finance and growth. On the right-hand side, or the top right-hand side, you see operations and scale. This is to do with everything around the business continuity, with the business being able to deliver whatever it has sold and meet its obligations to its clients and partners. It's one thing to be able to do what you said you would do. So if I sell a contract, I need to be able to deliver the contract. If I sell a project, I need to be able to execute the project. But a business has to also understand the principle of scale. And what I mean by scale is if it takes 10 people to do one project, and I continue at that level of work or level of efficiency, every time I wanted to get a second project, I have to have 10 people ready, because once that project comes, I need another 10 to execute. So the method of growing is very linear. Scale is about exponential growth. So if we need 10 people to do one project, can we do 2 projects with 15 people? Can we do 3 projects with 18 people? Can we do 25 projects with 40 people? Because that's what allows a company to scale. And once you hit that exponential curve and you start that trajectory of going upwards steeper than everybody else, you are, I don't want to use the word unstoppable, but you're very hard to now catch up. At the bottom of this circle, you see people and performance. People and performance has to do with the human element of the organization. Regardless of what happens in the fields of technology and AI, there will always be some human components that will be involved in a company. Whether that's to do with client management, or it's to do with strategy and ideation, or it's to do with communication. Regardless, you are hiring people. And the process by which you are getting these people to come on board and join the company has to be really well defined. Because if it is not well defined, I'm sure all of you have at least one horror story about a bad hire that you've had in the past. And it's almost a rite of passage that you are not a tried and tested entrepreneur until you've had a bad hire that you've had to make a decision to fire. And firing is hard. It hurts. You know, you're not able to sleep at night after you fired somebody. Maybe some of you are now used to firing, so now you can, chop off a dozen heads and go home and sleep soundly. But at least in the early days, firing really, really hurts. But the pain of having somebody who is not contributing within the organization is even worse. So how are we ensuring that we get the best people on board? That's the people side. Once they are on board, how are we ensuring that they're achieving their own potential, so that we're happy with them as a business and they're happy with themselves as professionals in the team? So people and performance and how that is managed and developed is something that is fundamental to the success of any company. Now, if these three exist in a company, that company will be able to survive. Will they be able to thrive? Will they be able to dominate their market? Will they be able to continuously set new records and be the trailblazers? Unlikely, because there are two other components that are yet to be realized and yet to be implemented into the company. Some of them have already been brought up, so I'm not going to ask you to share any more thoughts if you don't have any other ones, and I'd like to open them up over here. The first one is technology and innovation. The reason why this isn't a core component is because even before we had the technology that, for example, we have today, businesses were running fine. We have some people on this call who've been running their business for well over a decade. And back then, things were very different. Shog, for example, has been running for over 2 decades. Emails and online booking systems and online payment systems, none of this existed back then. But her business was successful back then. And as technology changes and improves, it allows the organization to do better, to do more, to move faster, to be more efficient. But you have to be on top of this. So think about the accounting element of the business. All of the accounting terminology that we use, the journal and the ledger and the receipt books and so on, all of these are names of the actual hard copy books that we used to use a few decades ago. Once it became normal to start using computers, a lot of people started using programs, for example, like Excel to manage their accounts. Some still do. But the names of those books still stayed. And then we started using platforms such as, for example, Zoho or Xero or Tally to manage our accounts, which are very specific accounting softwares. But the names of those books still stayed. And then you might have a full-fledged ERP. You have Sage or Oracle or SAP, but the names of those books still stay. The principle of accounts is still the same. It's how it is implemented in the company that makes a difference. Now, if you're trying to run a company, for example, Rabi is running a drone company. If he was doing orders and project plans, etc., by writing everything out by hand and faxing it to everybody, their efficiency would be absolutely terrible. But Rabi is able to do what he can because the platforms that they're utilizing internally to expedite communication allow them to move at the speed which sets them apart, which sets them ahead of everybody else and gives them that edge. That's where technology matters. Technology for the sake of technology is useless. There's a very powerful saying by Bill Gates where he says the first rule of technology is that technology applied to an inefficient organization will make it more inefficient. The second rule is applied to an efficient organization, technology will make it more efficient. Technology doesn't change anything, it magnifies it. So if you're bad, implementing technology may make you worse. If you're good, implementing technology may make you great. But you have to be good to begin with. That's why, for example, operations and scale is so important before we move on to tech. The innovation side of things is just being really cognizant. How are we doing things now and how can we make them better? It could be a small 1-2% tweak. It could be a massive transformation of your business model. As long as you have great ideas flowing from everybody in the organization, the company will continue growing. The last element, and this is the core of every successful organization, and it is the heart of every great company, is the leadership and culture. And there was a huge number of responses to do with leadership in the earlier question that I asked. You can have a sweatshop that is very profitable and that has been running for decades. We have many of them in the world today, sadly. But those are not great companies. The greatest companies are not the ones who have left the biggest impacts, but the ones who have left the best memories and left the best legacies. So most of the people on this call are in positions of leadership. What is your leadership legacy? Most of you are part of teams. What is your team culture? And if it isn't what you want it to be, whether your legacy or your culture isn't what you want it to be, that's on you. Because if you don't change it, nothing's going to change. Now, I want to pause at this point before I move on to the next slide and just say this. These are the 5 principles. There may be some things that are industry specific that you need to add to these. There may be some things that are maybe taken for granted in your company because you're just so good at doing them, you never thought about it. And that's fine. All of these are principles. Principles are timeless. So however your company expands, however you grow, however your market develops, please keep these in mind. The two latter ones which I showed you, the leadership and culture and technology and innovation, there aren't too many things to do in them. There's actually quite a short list of things that you probably want to do. The time to implement them is usually very long, and the impact of them is extremely high. Whereas the other three, which are in the white circle in the middle, finance and growth, ops and scale, people and performance, the list of things to do is significant. And when you come to the strategy list of the planning exercise, you'll see that there's a lot of things to do. The time to implement each one is relatively short, and the impact will be between small to medium, depending on which strategy you're looking at. And as an example, this is what some of the things that go into each of these steps look like. So just, keep in mind that, and by the way, you're going to get this later on. So if it looks a little complex right now, we're going to come back to this later on. But these are some of the areas that you're going to be working on within each element of these 5 principles. Now, with that, I'm going to start. I'm going to hand over to James in just a second, and I want to introduce his topic through this system. On the top left, you see finance and growth. Finance and growth is everything to do with the generation and management of money. One of the things that goes into finance and growth is effective marketing, and one of the things within effective marketing is digital marketing. And the importance of having a strong marketing platform and having a strong marketing system cannot be overstated.